I'd like to talk about the strategies of Al Qaeda's next wave of attacks, as predicted in their own manual written by Saif Al Adel, the alleged emir of Al Qaeda, whether it be him or Hamza bin Laden. It's not sure because Al Qaeda didn't officially clear an emir. But I do want to talk about the upcoming threat of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan and by extension in Syria. And this is actually from the Center for the CRC, which is the Council on Foreign Relations. And if you go down this page a little bit, we'll get to could Afghanistan again become a safe haven for terrorists? And as you could read here, international observers remain concerned from that the Taliban support terrorist organizations, particularly Al Qaeda. And under Bill Roggio, and one of the best in the country regarding the current threat in Afghanistan, even suggests that Al Qaeda is serving in the areas of government in the Taliban. This way, the Taliban has more control over Al Qaeda. This is the reason why we don't see any media interviews, any decrees, or anything like this from Al Qaeda, because they brought a lot of attention. The United States invaded Afghanistan after it refused to hand over bin Laden, the mastermind 9/11 attacks, which, he wasn't the mastermind. That was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Under the Taliban's rule, Afghanistan could become a safe haven for terrorists capable of launching attacks against the United States and its allies, experts say, despite Taliban statements that Afghanistan soil will not be used against the security of any other country. But in an April 2022 report, the United Nations team that monitors the Taliban said the group remains close with Al Qaeda and that Al Qaeda has a safe haven under the Taliban and increased freedom of action. Indeed, in August, a United States drone strike killed Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri just 2 years ago. And that, Zawahiri was actually living in Kabul. But with Zawahiri gone, the new leadership of Al Qaeda is indeed under the control of the Taliban. So, with its strong ties to Pakistan, by the way, which the article does mention, you have groups like the Tehrik-e-Taliban group and the Pakistan Taliban as well, which coordinates well with Al Qaeda and has been for over 20 years. I mentioned Bill Roggio, who's the senior fellow at the Defense of Democracies and the editor of the Long War Journal. He went on Fox News recently and about 2 years ago and said that Al Qaeda is indeed serving in areas of the government of Afghanistan and has established training camps in 10 provinces, as well as madrasas and operations centers and religious schools. In fact, the Taliban opened up, I think, like 17 madrasas. And that Al Qaeda is basically telling the West that it plans to use this terror infrastructure to attack the West. And so, since we have very little intelligence on the ground, because we left Afghanistan in 2021, what are we left with? Well, Al Qaeda's unofficial emir, and also a part of its Shura Council, which is the religious committee, as well as part of its military committee since the death of Mohammed Atef in 2001, Saif Al Adel wrote a book called The 33 Strategies of War. Now, for those who are not familiar with this, Saif Al Adel wrote a book in September of 2024, which was called the Free Readings of the 33 Strategies of War, which is basically a commentary on the book of the same name by Robert Greene. Robert Greene is an American author on strategy and power, and he has written several books, and actually was given a job by the Israeli government to become part of its military infrastructure in terms of strategy. And I think he turned it down, if I'm correct, actually. He's opposed to the nation state of Iran, which is not um, particularly shocking, considering that Green comes from a very predominantly Jewish family, um, and is actually one of the most banned authors in prisons in the United States, mainly because they consider his books a security breach, a breach for security, because he talks about strategy, talks about war strategy. Um, he draws on analysis of past historical figures and events throughout his writing. So here's a guy with um, a lot of influential power by publishing these books that basically are a guide to anyone who wants power or observes power or wants to arm themselves against power. And what better group of people or organization than those who are arming themselves against the first world power in the United States? Saif Al Adel wrote the book based on Robert Greene's book, and he published it in September 2024, and he published it under his real name. Saif Al Adel's real name is Muhammad Salah al-Din Zaidan. And the book states that now Saif Al Adel outlines in the book a radical new strategy for Al Qaeda in the global jihad, one that differs from, say, um, Osama bin Laden, Dr. Ayman Zawahiri, or Al Qaeda's and jihad's most influential figures like Abdullah Yusuf Azam or Saeed Imam al Sharif. For those who do not know, or for those who are very particularly in the know of Al Qaeda, Saeed Imam al Sharif, also known as Dr. Fadl, had written a manuscript in the 1980s about how to define defensive jihad under the influence of Abdullah Yusuf Azam to the current state of terrorist networks like Abu Sayyaf at the time, Al Qaeda, and Jemaah Islamiyah. These were all associates of Al Qaeda. Today, they moved away from that. And so the strategy that Saif al Adel or Muhammad Salah al-Din al-Zaidan wrote was to move away from traditional old school jihadi thinking, especially from the Sunni-centric focus. And what he wants is what Hamza bin Laden wants, and that is to be a flexible organization and build relationships with other jihadi groups of the Salafi kind, of the Wahhabi kind, and nation states who are sympathetic to those goals. Now, I've been telling you for a while now in previous videos about the threats of bombing Islamic countries. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a faction of mindsets within these countries that didn't exist before with socialist governments. But by eliminating Gaddafi and Assad and getting on board people like King Abdullah, who's being warned about, if you don't get on board, this is what's next for you, of westernization of these Islamic countries so that Israel and the United States could control the Middle East. This was in the Yodid Yunan plan. This was in the Project for New American Century. Now, what I want to do basically is read you a specific area of the book. It's in the introduction. And as you can see here, this is the English translated version. I was very fortunate to get it from a very knowledgeable expert on jihadism before I was banned from Twitter, which I even made a new one and I was banned there. I don't know why I'm banned. I was not given a reason other than I was an inauthentic account, whatever that means. I mean, I had to show my ID card and I was a premium member. I don't know what happened. I think I was flagged and I don't know. I do this day. Well, anyway, I was given the English translated of Saif Al Adel's book. I want you to read this with me, okay? In a specific second, this is the introduction. I might do a video series on this because this is the mindset of what's coming. Because, like I said, I hope I'm wrong, but I think the next attack is going to be bigger than 9/11. And it's going to involve a number of different organizations aligned with Al Qaeda. And this terrorist attack will be blamed on Iran. And the attention will be driven away, the negative attention that Israel is getting, and rightfully so, regarding the Gaza issue, because we'll go to war against Iran and Lebanon. And once they're destroyed, that means the Shia branch of Islam will basically be destroyed along with it. This is the goal of the Gulf under the Saudi monarchy under Mohammed bin Salman, and it's the goal of the Israeli government under Isaac Herzog and Benjamin Netanyahu. So read along with me. In a specific section of this book, particularly in its military segment, certain sentences and phrases are written with precision and depth, reflecting the harsh realities of experience. Among these examples are knowledge, has taught us to think more rationally and strategically during times of conflict, and to channel our hostile desires instead of denying or suppressing them. Strategic fighters operate in a completely different manner. They consider their long-term objectives before conflict arises, decide which battles to avoid, which ones to engage in, and know how to channel and control their emotions. When forced to fight, they do through clever and indirect maneuvers, making it difficult to trace their deceptive methods. This is a really big commentary here, because this is what I think is going to happen, that the next terrorist attack will be done under the guise of deception, meaning that I did a video about a month ago about how I could see a scenario where Al-Qaeda operatives or Salafist operatives or jihadi operatives dressed as military or police or EMS, and in the next protest or in a very nice, unassuming day, like on a weekend, maybe a Friday, maybe a Wednesday, in the middle of a crowded street, they start opening fire. And in return, you start shooting back at police and firemen or policemen or military. Meanwhile, you're shooting at actual police and military who are coming to the aid of those who are injured. So you don't know it. This is called deception. This is the strategic thinking of Al Qaeda, much different than bin Laden, who is about the grandiose style of terrorism in your face. They'll tell you what's coming. This is a much, much more dangerous proposition. That's the reason why I'm going to do probably a video series on the book, because this book, which was released, is going to go in the afterthought of consciousness and forgotten about. But here it is. This is what they're training now. Remember, he's part of the military committee, Saif Al Adel. When forced to fight, they do so through clever and indirect maneuvers, making it difficult to trace their deceptive methods. To be peaceable in the face of wolves like these is a source of endless tragedy. In other words, to come as a face of peace, a face of security. Meanwhile, you're destroying that face because you think this is an Al Qaeda operative. Meanwhile, he's an actual cop. And in return, this will actually create the legislation that I predict will be to neutralize the Second Amendment and to also have the public majority against immigration to the United States. This is a leftist proposition and a conservative proposition. So these are the two endless debates over the last 20 years in the political field: immigration and the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, which is the only amendment that cannot be amended, because it is the core principle of defense against a tyrannical government. And the government's going to blame you, saying you don't need these weapons. And because these weapons are out there, look what happened. We need to restrict people from obtaining these weapons. Do you really trust the government? I don't. Some of the quoted sentences highlight the superiority of one strategy over another. For instance, it observed through Sun Tzu's understanding, which emphasizes winning a war without bloodshed, is deeper and more realistic than when Gandhi advocated, which itself has not been immune to criticism. And now Robert Wright, as Saif Al Adel points out, Robert Wright cites the strategy of ignorance, creating ignorance among the attacked. How do you create ignorance? By not educating them on the current threat matrix in Afghanistan and Syria. It's almost like the state is predicting what's going to happen without having foreknowledge. Or if they have foreknowledge about an impending attack by allowing it to happen, like they did with 9/11. Now I'm going a little bit forward there by saying they have foreknowledge, but they might have. I mean, foreign intelligence certainly did. I can make an argument for that. Domestic intelligence, maybe. But nevertheless, it's called indecisiveness against the threat to security by not doing anything. So the strategy of ignorance, creating ignorance among the attacked. In the introduction of the book, Robert writes, were soldiers not taught strategy? Because it would not assist them in the battlefield. Moreover, it was not desirable for commanders to provide their soldiers with such practical knowledge that might enable them to organize rebellions or revolutions. During the colonial era, this principle was applied more broadly. Indigenous people in European colonies were recruited as soldiers in Western armies and carried out many policing duties. However, even those who reached high military ranks were deliberately kept uninformed about strategic knowledge that could become dangerous to them. Preserving strategy and war techniques as a domain of the ruling authorities was intentionally aimed at keeping them in the hands of elites and oppressive forces who are keen on division and conquest. Does that sound familiar? That's the United States government. That's the Western powers, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Canada, okay? The superpowers. Al-Qaeda is learning fast. That's the one thing you can't say about them, that they're stupid. Yes, the menial soldiers are ignorant. They're illiterates, easy to manipulate through media manipulation, media reinforced reverse psychology, propaganda. There's a war for your mind. This is the last battlefield, the last area of control that those in power would love to control your mind. And it's working because here in the United States, we're a mass of ignorance in regards to human constructs. It's working, ladies and gentlemen. This is a propaganda war, more so than a linear war, a physical war. This is a spiritual, mental war. And they're going to get you on board to revisit Al-Qaeda, Iraq 2.0. Because when Al-Qaeda attacks the United States, they'll be deceptive. They might have faked profiles of being Iranian Revolutionary Guards or agents of Lebanon, of Hezbollah. One thing Al-Qaeda does, they're experts on, is producing false passports, false identification. They've been doing so for 20 somewhat years, 25 years since the creation. They used to train this in Jihad Wal training camp, Al Farouk training camp. Now they have these more remote training camps that we can't get spies in like we used to. And this is the danger that carries out. All right. Now, read this and then I'll end it here. It says, but have ordinary people in the West have been spared from this process of ignorance? No, that's right. They have been turned into distorted beings. Our struggle today is a struggle between the people. Now look at what he writes here. Our struggle today is a struggle between the people, all people, and the class that rules the world against the minority that has seized resources and enslaved people. So Al-Qaeda is making no distinction between the power that be and the people that suffer under their power, us, the citizenry. Worse yet, During the COVID-19 era, they usurped people's savings. And during the Russia-Ukraine war, by fielding the hunger crisis, they stole people's wealth. What comes after this? Briefly put, it is their war against humanity, a war that has exceeded their ability to control. Thus, they must eliminate half of humanity by any means possible without drawing attention to their schemes. Now, whether you want to think that's conspiracy or not, I mean, take a look at what they're doing to the Middle East. That is more motivation for these groups to act and to respond. Again, this is not saying that what they're doing is justice. Violence begets violence. It is not the end all. Terrorism is not a final response. The final response is death. But terrorism is a reciprocating anomaly. By creating this type of engagement of war, the United States will respond in kind. After 9/11, we should have invaded Saudi Arabia. We didn't. We invaded Iraq. We invaded Syria. We invaded Libya. Were these to fight the war against terrorism? No. This was basically in response to earlier foreign policy guidelines that wanted to destroy the Middle East. So what Saif Al Adel wrote here is not a conspiracy. It's actually true that the United States wants to control the Middle East. And by doing so, they have to kill millions of people in order to do so. Now, look what's happening in Gaza. That alone, just Gaza alone, is enough propaganda for terrorists to attack the West for the next 10 years. Because if you think by eliminating 50,000 people in response to a terrorist attack that killed 1,300 people is a worthwhile cause without any repercussions, you're deluding yourself. And that's the reason why people like Saif Al Adel will always exist. We have to get rid or replace, by any means necessary, the Western governments of the world. Is it a pipe dream, or is it a worthy fight? Yes, it is. But for now, we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of what we, the United States government, and I hate to use we because I'm not part of this government. I'm against it. I'm for the common people. It's the reason why I do these videos, to tell you to stop voting, to stop it. Don't become part of the game. But I could see why these groups attack and why they exist in the first place. You have to get to the understanding. If you're just going to say, oh, Islam is a terrorist organization, it's a terrorist religion, and they all want to kill, that's simple-minded thinking. That's what simple-minded people do. What Saif Al Adel wrote about ignorance. Has the West been spared from the process of ignorance? No. Regarding the mindset of a terrorist and regarding the mindset of their own evil government. And so these videos are basically to prepare yourself or to educate yourself on the enemy that is going to be a threat to the national security of the United States. And right now, the United States government is supporting Al Qaeda in Syria. By extension, Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. And as usual throughout history, if you want to find out who tomorrow's enemies are, find out who we're funding today. All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.